Over the last couple days, EA has been slowly but surely dropping all the ratings for NHL 25. I believe now there's up to the top 300 players available to look at. Obviously, they did their top 10 centers, wingers, defenders, goalies, and all that stuff that they like to do. Now that we're done with all of that, I wanted to make a video talking about some of the ratings, comparing players, and asking the question of whether or not they did a good job. So for this video, you can see at the top, I have quite a few tabs open. I want to be comparing some players and talking about ratings and whether or not some players got overrated or there's underrated players to talk about. Of course, as a disclaimer, I'm not a scout. I don't watch every single hockey game, so my opinions on players are purely based off stats from what I've seen from them and advanced analytics. Now, since I didn't want to make this video an hour long, I'm going to try to keep all the analytics and stuff pretty quick, but I want to use them to give educated opinions on the player ratings. So for this video, we're going to be on the EA Sports NHL 25 website where you can view all the ratings. Like I said, there's 300 ratings out right now, I believe, top 300 players that you can look at. So the plan is to start from the very top with Connor McDavid, work our way down and talk about some of these ratings. So starting with Connor McDavid, we actually have our first comparison that I want to make. Now you can see Connor McDavid is a 97 overall. I'm not going to be making any arguments against that rating. Puck handling, offensive stats, skating, obviously they should all be really high as he's the best player in the world. Defensively, his stats were what I was more curious about to see what ratings they gave him, because sometimes it feels like they inflate the overall rating by using defensive stats, which I feel like makes a lot of inaccuracies. But again, if we pull up the advanced analytics, you can actually see that Connor McDavid is really good defensively, which I'll be honest, I didn't know that. So that really just shows how good of a player he is. And I think a 97 overall rating is absolutely justified. I know some people want him up at 99 overall, but honestly, I don't mind them leaving that little space to grow just in case a better player does come by or if he gets even better. I should also mention that we're not going to be talking about X factors, as I think it's an entirely different topic and it's kind of not what this video is about. Connor McDavid 97 overall. So if we go back here, scroll down a bit, we see at number 3 Nikita Kucherov. Now we're going to skip over McKinnon here because I like where McKinnon's at, but I want to talk about Kucherov here at a 95 overall. Now with Kucherov, this is where I think they're using the defensive stats again to kind of inflate the overall rating, because if we look at this ranking, a lot of people probably look at Nikita Kucherov as a top 3 player in the league for good reason, as he is very good offensively. But I think that's part of the problem, as fans tend to value offensive stats a bit more than defensive stats, especially since they're easier to see. Obviously, they get shown through highlights and you can see them easily on paper. But for Nikita Kucherov, I honestly think 95 overall might be a little bit too high, just because if we look at his defensive stats, you can see they're a bit high for the player he is. Now, obviously, offensive stats should be all close to max. He's absolutely amazing offensively, but defensively, we have 87 defensive awareness, shot blocking 84. Stick checking can be higher, as usually the talented offensive players are good at stick checking, but I feel like these defensive stats are a bit too high for Nikita Kucherov, especially when we pull up the advanced analytics. If we look at the advanced analytics, we can see that Nikita Kucherov is not a very good defensive player. He's pretty much pure offense, and I think that should reflect in his stats by having, again, the really good offensive stats. But I think they shouldn't be afraid to lower his defensive stats, even if that makes him lower on the rankings, as I think defensive stats are way too undervalued on these EA ratings. And that's going to be a trend going forward in these other comparisons to look at, is usually EA doesn't really get the defensive stats right, and I think that's something that going forward they need to do better, even if that means weighing offensive stats more heavily than defensive stats to get the overall ratings higher. If you don't want to see Nikita Kucherov at like a 92 overall if you decreased his defensive stats, I just think it's often that the fan base puts a number in our heads for what a player should be at. Like Nikita Kucherov at a 95 looks good to me. I think he's a top 3 player, top 5 player, but again, I'm not weighing in the defensive stats enough for that assessment, so I think that's something that really does need to be considered more going forward. And if that means reworking the overall stats and everything for players going forward, I think that might be the move. So we'll close these tabs here as we are done with McDavid and Kucherov. So for this next comparison, we have Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't find the advanced analytics for Cale Makar. I only found the Quinn Hughes advanced analytics. So we'll talk about Quinn Hughes quickly here, but if you just look at his advanced analytics, you can see he's pretty much a flawless defenseman, great offensively, amazing defensively. The one thing is he doesn't really throw the body, but he makes up with it with a good stick, great poke checks, stick lifts, and all of that other stuff, and positioning. So he's still a really good defenseman. Obviously, he just won the Norris. A lot of people still don't really understand how good defensively Quinn Hughes is, and that he's not just a one-trick pony being good offensively. Now, I'm not here to try and say that Cale Makar is a bad defenseman at all. Obviously, he's amazing offensively. I couldn't find the advanced analytics, like I said, but from what I know, he's not as good defensively as Quinn Hughes. I personally just think that Quinn Hughes should at least least be the same overall as Cale Makar. Cale Makar does have higher defensive ratings, just by a little bit though, but I think they should be the same rating. So the next guy I want to talk about here is Sidney Crosby, who I honestly think got slightly overrated. Now, I love Crosby and I hate to be the one to rain on the parade, but if we just look at his advanced analytics, you can see defensively he didn't have quite the same season. Now, given he is on a worse Pittsburgh Penguin team, but defensively he got slightly worse, so I think those defensive stats should be lowered by just a little bit. I think 94 again is a bit high for him. I think 92 would have been a better fit, and I know offensively he was very dominant this season. I think he's definitely still a top player, but 94 for me just seems a little bit high on Sidney Crosby. Next guy I want to talk about here is Mitch Marner, who I honestly think is getting a little bit underrated. I think maybe a 92 plus would have been better fit for him. Obviously a guy who puts up way over a point per game, great puck handling skills, great offensively, amazing skater, and defensively he's actually really solid as well. Now, Maple Leafs fans, you can correct me here, but I believe he plays some penalty kill time. I don't have the advanced analytics like I said for this time, so maybe I'm wrong on this one. Besides that, I just think he should get a slight boost. I think he's a bit better than his ratings suggest offensively and defensively. Physically, obviously he's not good in that regard, but again, just a kind of a small thing. I thought Mitch Marner could use a slightly higher rating. For our next comparison here, I want to talk about Ilya Sorokin and Andrei Vasilevsky. Before I was going to talk about Shesterkin, but I think these two are a better fit for a comparison. Now, if we look at this, Ilya Sorokin is a 90 overall, which I don't think is a bad rating for him. I know he had a down season, 909 save percentage. Again, don't have advanced analytics for this, and it's hard to judge as I'm not a New York Islanders fan, but I know he's a solid goalie who had a bad season. Now, if we look at a guy like Vasilevsky, he's 92 overall and had a way worse season at a 900 save percentage, which is not good at all, and he's still a 92 overall. So I just don't think these ratings make much sense when we're comparing the two goalies. Even if we're high on both goalies for a rebound season, I just think they should be probably about the same rating. I think this is more of just a case of Andrei Vasilevsky getting really overrated here for his past cups and all of that stuff, which I understand, but I think this is a case of EA Sports weighing way too heavily in the past rather than the present. So the next guy here that I just want to quickly talk about, which I thought was going to be a candidate for a bit of an overrate, is Connor Bedard, who I absolutely love. I think he's talented and he's going to be one of the best players in the league, but at this point I think an 88 overall is a bit of an overrate, especially for a guy who was under a point per game. I know he was on a bad team, but still I think he should be closer to maybe an 86 overall rating. Offensively, obviously he has great offensive stats, as he should, but I think they're just slightly overrated. Defensively, I don't mind his stats. I'm glad to see that they're not super inflated, but just a little slight overrate here. I just thought I would mention that real quick, but not as bad as Cole Caulfield, who got insanely overrated for this season, and honestly I don't really get it. If anything, I think Cole Caulfield should also be around an 86 85 overall. He's coming off a season where he had 28 goals, 65 points in 82 games, which is solid, don't get me wrong, but he's not very good defensively. Those offensive stats, while being solid, are not worthy of an 88 overall. I think he should be probably about the same rating as Bedard, if not lower, considering that Bedard had a better points per game. But I think this is one of the more egregious overrates. Not too sure why he got so overrated, but I'm going to still give him the respect for wearing number 13 going into this year. And just to show you how overrated Cole Caulfield was, we have two players here in Wyatt Johnson and Matthew Boldy, who I think had better seasons than him. Boldy had 29 goals, 69 points in 75 games, which of course is more goals and a higher points percentage and a higher points per game, and here he is at a lower overall. And while I don't know from personally watching, I'm guessing he's a better defensive player than Cole Caulfield, as Cole Caulfield again is not a very good defensive player. You can see EA even gave him good defensive stats, but honestly I think 87 overall is a good rating for Matthew Boldy. It's just compared to Caulfield, it just doesn't look very good. Another guy again we could talk about here is Wyatt Johnson, who had a really good season as well, putting up 32 goals, 65 points in 82 games, which is similar to what Caulfield put up, but again a better defensive player and a player who had a really good playoffs, coming in at a lower rating than Cole Caulfield. In my opinion, I think 87 is a good rating for both Boldy and Johnson, and Caulfield should probably be closer to maybe an 85 overall. So the next three players I want to talk about are all young defensemen, two of which are being talked about as being overrated and one of which is talking about being underrated. Again, I don't know the three players the best, but we'll start off here actually with the cover boy Luke Hughes. We knew he was going to get a bit of a cover boy boost, as they tend to get. 86 overall definitely seems high for him. Now, he came off a pretty good rookie season with 47 points in 82 games with 9 goals. Don't get me wrong, that's great, but I'm guessing he's not quite that good defensively. Again, maybe I'm wrong with that, and he got a slight boost offensively. I think probably an 84 would have been a better number for Luke Hughes, or maybe at least like an 85. But I just feel 86 is a little bit high for him and is putting him in that upper echelon of defensemen, which I don't know if he quite deserves at this point. Now, next off, we have another young defenseman here in Bowen Byram, who came off a pretty okay season. He had 20 points with Colorado in 55 games before going to Buffalo, where he put up 9 points in 18 games. 87 overall seems really high for him, especially when I don't think he's all that good defensively at an NHL level. Again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and I just don't think he's quite there offensively yet to have deserved an 87 overall. Again, honestly, on paper, at least offensively, Hughes put up better stats than him, and you have Bowen Byram here higher overall than Hughes, and we're already talking about how overrated Hughes is. So I think Byram also should be coming down probably to like an 84, maybe even an 83 overall. Maybe that's a slight underrate, but 87 is just pretty egregious for an overrate. And then we'll talk about another guy here in Jake Sanderson, who ends up going under these two despite being a better defenseman debatably. I know a lot of Ottawa fans are really upset about this underrate, as he's coming off his second season putting up about a half a point per game in the NHL, and from what I know about him is he's a lot better defensively while putting up still really respectable defensive stats at only 22 years old. So I think 86 overall isn't a bad rating for him. I just think in comparison to Luke Hughes and Byram, it makes it look pretty bad. But overall, I think, again, it's a good number for him. Maybe even an 87 would be a good fit. I don't know. Ottawa fans would have to let me know. But moving on, that's kind of the only players I want to talk about. I didn't want to make this video too long, but I want to look at whether or not the ratings for NHL 25 look good. And overall, I think they're pretty good, but you do have your normal cases of EA overrating or underrating certain players. Again, I'll put the website link in the description if you want to go check it out. They have all the way up to the top 300 players. And as a Canucks fan, I'm happy to see JT Miller finally gain the respect he deserves at a 92 overall, and also seeing that they didn't lower Demko by too much. Again, it might be a slight overrate just because of his injuries and stuff. We'll have to see what kind of year he has. And honestly, they rated Pedersen pretty good, as I think they do have a bit of a history of overrating him, but he did just come off a pretty bad season. Now, as I was looking through the ratings, I almost missed the guy who made me want to make this video, which is Alex Ovechkin, who I think definitely got a bit of that EA boost for having a previously good career, as we've seen before. As I feel like the comparison here with Ovechkin is Jonathan Taves, who was still like a 94 overall, way past his prime. Now, Ovechkin still did come off a 31 goal, 34 assists, 65 point season in 79 games, which is pretty good, but is it 89 overall worthy? Probably not. And when you add in the fact that he's not very good defensively, I think these defensive stats could come down a bit. And I think even his skating could come down a little bit, as he is really slowing down. And some of these offensive stats like offensive awareness could come down a little bit. I think 86, 87 would have been a bit of a better fit for Ovechkin, and that's still giving him kind of that veteran boost. But yeah, kind of an egregious one here. Even give him the X factors if you want, but 89 overall is very high for Ovechkin. So with that has been the video. Let me know what you guys think of these ratings down below. Who do you think is getting overrated, underrated? Let me know what you think of my takes here. Are they good? Are they bad? But with that all being said, guys, take care of yourselves.